made wagons. So that trademark says Mitchell Lewis Wagon Company, and that's what they actually made at the time. And then this was called the Mitchell, and the Mitchell was the actual car. So this is the Mitchell. They made about 30 of the Mitchells. So this one was actually never sold to a customer. This was held by the family for most of the last 112 years. I met with at least 6 members of the Mitchell family and the Lewis family when I purchased this, and they both wished me well and knew I'd do a pretty good job restoring it back to being original again, and it's back to being original again. This is the only Mitchell in the world with an air-cooled motor. Very few American cars had air-cooled. This was their very, very, very first version of a car. And this was their very first version of a car. They had been making motorcycles for 2 years, and they absolutely had world record motorcycles as far as their speeds. They could go 60 and 70 miles an hour, and the motorcycle basically was a single cylinder like one of these two with a direct drive, and that was their air-cooled motorcycle, and they were very successful with that. Motorcycles, they ended up making them only for 2 or 3 years, and then they thought that the order of things were going to be to cars. So then they started into cars, and then they made cars from 1903. 1904 was the first year they actually sold them. This one was made in late 1903 as sort of a demonstrator. And they made them up to 1923, and they made 23,000 cars over that 20-year period. Successful company. They were an average price car of each day, and the average price certainly changed with the technologies. The first few years, until about 1909, they were all handmade. This one was extremely handmade, and this car was made for Helen Lewis. The company itself was called Mitchell Lewis Wagon Company, and Helen Lewis was the owner's wife. And at this time, women never drove cars. Women hardly even rode in cars. They were an experimental thing. If you could make a car and that a woman could start it and drive it, you could really pave the road for your selling of your cars, because it looked like it might be a genuine article that you might want to buy. If it was that easy to use, well, you should consider it. And then Mitchell even had a slogan of the day that if you drive one of our cars, you'll buy it. So they would allow a prospective person, to drive a car 500 miles to make sure that they wanted to buy the car. And then at the end of the 500 miles, the people ended up buying most of the cars. So they sold a lot of their cars by that slogan and by that method. It has buggy springs all the way around, tremendous amount of travel. It can really take bumps really, really well. Nice travel. Has a normal steering, or at least somewhat normal. It's a box similar to today. It steers pretty easily because it's a lightweight car. The transmission is a 3-speed on the outside. This was the sort of the American version of a transmission in 1905 and 6 and 7. Mitchell already had adopted it by 1903. This hood is an interesting item. Even though they didn't have windshields at the time, they didn't have tops at the time, they varied the amount of cooling and the amount of wind on the driver and navigator by varying the angles of these hoods. So this could come up a foot, could be scooped in, could be scooped down. They really use this type of hood a lot. So if you see those pictures of the 1903 Paris-Madrid race, you'll see this type of hood a lot. So this was a really representative car for the Paris-Madrid race that happened in Europe. This car never did that because its purpose was to demonstrate how good a Mitchell car was. These are early motoring badges. The AA was like AAA is today, and then the Touring Club was what they did. That badge is from 1904 or 1905. Very few people in the world had a car. Well, as soon as there was cars, there was a club, and people drove them. So that's how they defined that they were in that club, and they would go have their pleasure rides. And it was only the richest people of the day, or the most inventive people and engineering basis people would have a car, but those people wanted to play with them or race them. All the fenders are wood, and they're original, and the original wood. The seats are completely wood, and they're pretty much perfect. The tail light is a kerosene light. It shines upon the plate. The plate, they didn't have commercial plates back then available from the motor vehicle in each state, so a person would go to a hardware store and get his own letters on leather and then create his own plate. And then this one is legal in the state of Arizona, and this is registered 1904X, and that's what the car is, its date also. Every 40 or 50 years, it seems like the car changes hands from the Mitchell family back to the Lewis family, back to the Mitchell family, or at least it looks like it's been owned by the Mitchell and Lewis families for a long time, and each of the two families have had museums. The Mitchell Family Museum, at least the one in Michigan, closed down a year ago, and then the Lewis family was going to purchase it and put it in their museum, but they had said that I had done a good enough job promoting the Mitchell name, because we'd won the Great American Race in 1987 with a 1916 Mitchell. I restored a 1905/1906 Mitchell a couple years ago that we returned back to the family to let them ride in it, and that got some notoriety. So they figured that I was a pretty good Mitchell guy, and I was wanting to restore it back to what it was, and we would promote it and drive it and rally it. So they thought, well, as long as I paid the going rate, I would be able to have it. So I did that. And then, and I've still contacted the Mitchell family and the Lewis family since I got the restoration done, and they're both happy with what I've done. And that's nice too. The Mitchells went on later. The Mitchell Company made most of their huge amount of the wooden bodies for the Woodies in the 40s and 50s. And Mitchell still had 20,000 employees until 1975. So the Mitchell Company lingered on a long time, 130, 140 years it did. I believe they're not in business at all now, but they sure were in the 70s and early 80s still. So the procedure for starting it, we'll open the hood after I get it running. First thing you do is make sure that you're in neutral, and it's in neutral. The next thing you do is make sure the ignition box is off. You go ahead and push the choke in, and you put the timing to retard so it doesn't throw your arm out of socket, and then turn the gas on a little bit. Okay, so now it's ready to prime it, and you prime it by cranking it a few times. Okay, now it's primed. Now I'll turn the buzz box on. Now it should start. A 1903 car running, and it runs pretty smooth. Even though it's only got 2 cylinders, it runs pretty darn smooth.